So I'd like to talk about the character of the Norse hero, especially as we see it in Beowulf. Most of us consider the hero to be somebody who does the right, who does good things, or goes out of their way to help other people. And that's a fairly good conception of it. But we've got to consider a couple of things. The word hero itself comes from Greek heros, which means the protector or one who protects others. But a Greek hero is a very different thing from a Norse hero. Most Greek heroes, especially the Homeric Greek heroes and the heroes of legend, did what they did primarily out of a desire for kleos, for lasting fame or glory. They weren't so concerned about doing what was right or really doing what was good for others all the time. They were concerned primarily with the acquisition of lasting fame, to have their name last in glory for years, and have people talk about them and write legends about them. The Greeks believed that when you die, you go to a long gray day, so there's no heaven for the Greek-thinking people. The Norse were similar, but not entirely the same. See, the Norse believed that the gods, who were bright and noble, were also doomed. They're all going to be destroyed in a great cataclysm called Ragnarok. And in Ragnarok, the monsters, the dragons, the Fenris wolf, would consume the gods, and blackness would cover everything, darkness would cover everything. So the Norse gods were a brief flash in a very dark world, a very dark existence. That's different from the Greek gods. So Norse gods were this flash in a dark world. Greek gods really were more like eternal forces, like forces that were perpetual. And they were gods that had emerged out of darkness. So the chthonic gods were taken over by the Titanic gods, and the Titanic gods were taken over by the Olympian gods. And the Olympian gods eventually gave way to rational causes in the philosophic world of the Golden Age of Athens. So the heroes in Greece were looking for lasting fame, and that fame could be gotten from either doing the will of a god or being challenged by a god and defying a god. So for instance, the great Greek hero Heracles gains his kleos from defying or defeating, if you will, all the challenges that the goddess Hera puts in his way. So Heracleos, Hercules for those who speak Latin. Those Greek heroes then were sometimes in obedience with the gods and sometimes not in obedience with the gods. And frequently we see with Greek heroes, they do things that, in a Christian perspective at least, seems really obnoxious or sinful or wrong. Norse heroes, on the other hand, were men who were allied, or women who were allied with the Norse gods, the gods of light and the gods of rational thought. And they were doomed to die, but they were also noble in that doom. They faced their doom with a nobility. J.R.R. Tolkien points this out, that the Norse heroes were not heroes simply because they were larger than life, or because they defied gods, or because they were simply looking for lasting fame. They were heroes, or heroic, because they stood with the gods of light against the monsters and against the dragons, knowing that they were going to die anyway. The Greek heroes gained their heroic status, if you will, sometimes by trickery and sometimes by force of arms. Frequently in battle, it was by slaughtering lots of people. The Norse heroes, on the other hand, almost inevitably gained their heroism by fighting monsters and slaughtering monsters. They saw anybody who was not allied with the gods, the Aesir, as being a monster, and those monsters needed to be defied and needed to be slaughtered. So Norse, a martial attitude in the Norse was that people that were great in battle were heroic because they were fighting against the monsters. The Norse valued things like courage and honor and martial prowess, but they also honored somebody who could brag about that and somebody who was not afraid to put themselves forward. Our problem kind of comes when we start introducing the Christianity element, because Christianity, which developed in the Middle East first, in a culture that was Judaism infused with Greek philosophy of the golden era of philosophy, it really was a counter to the idea at the time of the Greek hero. The Greek hero was one who gained their fame by defying the gods, by showing prowess in battle especially, and by being strong. And if, for instance, you weren't strong, you were the bottom of the heap, you were miserable. Christianity was professing that those who are miserable, who don't show great power of arms, are the most blessed by God. And what Christianity, especially in the early days of Christianity, early years of Christianity, was saying was that this whole attempt to succeed by power, to succeed by strength, goes nowhere. You live by the sword and you die by the sword. So the Christians were professing that you turn the other cheek. When somebody slaps you, you give them the other cheek to slap. When someone gives you a cloak, you give it to the poor. If you want to really know God, you sell everything you have and you give it away. So unlike the Greek heroes that they were defining themselves against, a Christian was seen as somebody who did not look for fame, who did not look for glory, who did not look for wealth, who did not look for martial prowess, and who certainly didn't get any of that by strength of his arm. His kleos, the Christian's kleos, was in being a steward of God, a steward of Christ. As Paul says, right? Everything I do in the name of Christ. Or if I profess great things and I have not love, then I'm but a clanging bell. So for the Christian was subordinating himself to Jesus Christ, rather than defying the gods and rather than making a name for himself that would last in perpetuity. The Christian was seeking humility and was seeking smallness and seeking poverty. This would not be really in the purview at all of the Norse heroes, because the Norse heroes, the whole culture of Norse, the barbarian culture, was one of ring giving and gift giving and feasting and boasting and martial prowess, battle. And for almost all of the Norse culture, if you were weak and small and downtrodden, you were bottom of the heap, you were miserable, you were a slave. If you were powerful because you defied monsters, and you sided with the Aesir, the gods of light, and you accepted rings and gold and horses and gifts and women because you were worthy of that. That's how the kings basically held on to the loyalty of their thanes, of their knights. The problem arises when you have those rulers of the Gothic world, Clovis, for instance, and Theodoric and the others, baptized as Christians because they were baptized into the Christian church. Now they're baptized into the Arian church, which is slightly different from the Orthodox Christian church, it's true. But as soon as they're baptized into the Christian church, you've got a problem, because Christianity, which professes meekness and humility and turning the other cheek, is really antithetical to carving out something beautiful from darkness by force of the arms, martial power, and antithetical to boasting about yourself and gaining great glory through hacking away your enemies and accepting gifts. That leads to a whole problem of, on the one hand, how do you deal with bad men? How do Christians deal with bad men? in the early Christian church, how would they have dealt with bad men and awful people and the oppression of others and the slavery of others? It's highly likely that the Christians would have said, submit to it, allow this to happen. When the Christian church gets allied with, first with Constantine in the south, but then in the north, when it gets allied with the whole Frankish thing, the solution is the Christian warrior. A Christian warrior or a Christian hero is one who sees evil in the world and takes up arms against it, fights against it, slaughters the people that are doing evil because they're on the side of the monsters. Christians are on the side of the God of light, or the ushered, whereas those who do evil and do bad things are on the side of darkness and the monsters and the dragons. So for the Christian hero, who is a new creation, if you will, sometime around the year 800 when Charlemagne gets crowned the Emperor of the West, that creation of the Christian hero is a new thing in European culture. And it's a fusion of the Norse ideal of martial power, especially martial power knowing you're going to lose anyway, with the Christian ideal of meekness and humility. Eventually that evolves, of course, into the whole vision of knighthood that we see in chivalry in the High Middle Ages. But that's further down the road.